This is Paul McGann, and you're listening to the Fiveish Fangirls podcast.
The tangents we continue all the way to episode 320 of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast, and I shall quote Her Majesty the Queen. All too often, I fear, Prince Philip has had to listen to me speaking. Frequently, we have been discussed my intended speech beforehand, and as you will imagine, his views have been expressed in a forthright manner. He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years, and I and his whole family and this and many other countries owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim or we shall ever know. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Fiveish Fangirls podcast. So glad you could join us. Let's start off like we do with the ritual table and see who's joined us this week.
This is Brittany in Troy.
This is Chrissy in Salt Lake City.
This is Sally from Wisconsin.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Brittany is trying to escape the Matrix, but Agent Smith is fighting back.
Quite.
So,
We thought we had it sorted, but nope.
yeah.
So bear with us, folks.
Ugh.
We're just going to blame it on wildlife because she's out in the middle of nowhere.
It's
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's all right.
We'll figure it out.
Yep. Anyway,
Yes.
so yeah, we shall keep calm and carry on.
Mhm.
Keep the stiff upper lip. So yeah, we're going to forego most of our usual trimmings, banter for this week's episode, as unfortunately as has happened several times since we started doing this show, that occasionally things happen, people pass, and we need to take the time to acknowledge such person's passing beyond just our little news segment. So we're going to skip feedback and news. We'll get all to that. We'll go back to all that next week. So if you set feedback and you're not hearing it, don't worry, you'll hear it next episode.
Mhm.
So
We'll just have some extra, but yeah. So
Yeah.
this week, as I'm sure many of you have heard, or if you haven't, is the passing of the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, the husband of Queen Elizabeth II, at the age of 99, just 2 months, I believe, shy of his 100th birthday. Which I'm like, hey, I'm willing to give him the century.
yeah.
Yeah, Prince William in his statement, he said, mentioned his grandfather's century of life, and I'm like, you know what, good enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just reading, there's going to be a lot in the show notes for this week, a lot of links to various
Yeah.
articles from the BBC to the New York Times to, the Hoboken Times, who have, written articles and obituaries and, write-ups and everything. And then there's videos and all sorts of things that we'll put in the show notes. So if you want to read up, you certainly can. But just trying to write down even my own notes to try and keep straight, his, century of life and accomplishments. And it's like, how do you even be, it's like, how do you even try to begin to explain what someone in his position accomplished
Right.
in his 99, almost 100 years. And I mean, I've got 4 pages of notes, and that's just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah. I think part of this is you cover as much as you of it as you can, and then you leave it to others to cover the rest of it.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, like you said, like I mean, 99 years, nearly 100, and that spans most of the 20th century and everything that
Mhm.
happened there. It, we could refer to the Crown, the Netflix show, as as it covers most of the major things, but even then, it's still like, what a life.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
There's just still so much that
Mhm,
can only, you can only fit so much
right.
into a movie, or it's, a
Yeah.
miniseries, or, whatever. And
Mhm.
um yeah, so we'll do our best.
Mhm.
Obviously go seek out
Mhm.
people who are paid to do,
Mhm.
documentaries and
Yeah.
extensive write-ups and stuff, and do your own research. But I did we'll try to cover at least some of the highlights, I
Mhm.
guess. Um
And there's bound to be, in the years to come, more documentary type
oh yeah.
coverage of just,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
of his life, and Queen Elizabeth and all of this other stuff, as happens with the the royal family and such.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
today we pause to pay tribute to oh my gosh, yeah, like you said, Rachel, like you just scratched the surface of what we were able to find out
Mhm.
and learn.
Mhm.
So so we'll start at the beginning. Born in Monorepos in the Greek island of Corfu on the 10th of June 1921. Philip was the 5th child of and the only son of Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark and Prince Alice of Battenberg. And so he became a prince of both Greece and Denmark because of that, and was actually in line of succession for both thrones. Um, uh, uh, as you can extrapolate, he had 4 older siblings, all girls: Margarita, Theodora, Cecile, and Sophie. So not long after he was born, the family kind of started. There was some turmoil, as with a lot of royals in countries all over the world. There's going to be moments of issue and strife.
Yes.
But yeah, not
Call
long
me.
after
I'll be right there. Sorry.
not long after he was born, his maternal
Sure.
grandfather,
Yep.
Prince Louis of, I don't know if that's Louis or Louis, to be honest with you, of Battenberg, also known as Louis Mountbatten, Marquis of Milford Haven, died in London. Now Louis, I don't know what it is.
What? Well, how? Here's the question: How do Kate and Will pronounce their son's name? Because I think he's named after this relative. Is it Louis?
I don't know. I think it's Louis. I think it's
Okay.
Louis.
I think
Just
we had this
yeah. It's just I know I just know Battenberg is German. So I don't know if that makes a difference on the pronunciation or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the German. I just know French. It'd be Louis, but
Yeah.
I think yeah, we had this discussion when young Prince Louis was born. Louis,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I keep forgetting. So
Yeah.
Will and Kate, apologies.
Yes.
'Cause I know I would be annoyed if someone got my kid's name pronounced wrong.
Yeah.
But and
Yeah.
I'm not in line to the throne of England.
Yeah. Yeah. Say I know someone with their first name is spelled that way, and he goes by Louis. So, but that seems casual to me, so I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. So we'll just bounce between the two, probably.
Yeah.
But either way, his maternal grandfather died. That grandfather had been a naturalized British subject, because he renounced his German titles after he joined the Royal Navy, and adopted the surname Mountbatten, which is an anglicized version of Battenberg, because that was during the First World War, and anything German was not very favored by anyone outside Germany.
Yeah. First World War is just a giant soap opera of, well, the causes of it, the actual fighting of the war, that's a different story, but
yeah.
how they got there is just like, really?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another story.
Yeah. So his family takes off to London for the funeral and memorial service. They come back to Greece, where his father, Prince Andrew, had actually stayed behind, because he was the commander of the Greek army, or a division of the Greek army, and it just so happened that they were in the middle of a war with Turkey. Unfortunately, that war didn't go very well for the Greeks. Philip's uncle, who was the high commander of the Greek forces, King Constantine I, was blamed for the Greeks' defeat, essentially. And when the Turks came in and took over, they forced him to abdicate in September of 1922. There was Prince Andrew, Philip's father, was arrested, along with a bunch of other people. They ended up, the commanding officer of the army, a general, and 5 other senior politicians were also arrested. They were tried and executed. They were really, the royals were really concerned that Andrew and his wife and the children's lives were at risk. Thankfully, none of them were harmed, and actually, a revolutionary court banished the Prince Andrew, and his family from Greece for life. So they took off and settled in Paris in late 1922. So their lives were spared, but they could never come back to Greece ever again. They took off on the British naval vessel, the HMS Calypso, to evacuate. And apparently Philip, because he was still an infant at this point, he was like a year and a half old, they had to make do, and they made him a cot from a fruit box. That you
Mhm.
got little Prince Philip being evacuated to Paris in a fruit crate, essentially.
That's a story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess there are worse things to be carted off in, but whew,
Yeah.
quite the start to his young life. Even though I'm sure he didn't remember it later.
Yeah, no.
Just being a baby, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So once he got old enough, he needed to start going to school while they were still living in Paris. So they first sent him to the Elms, which was an American school in Paris. And the gentleman that ran the school described Philip as a know-it-all smarty person, but always remarkably polite.
Well, when you've got it, flaunt it, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Mhm.
So in 1928, when he was about 7, they sent him off to the United Kingdom to attend a Cheam school. And while he was attending that school, he bounced between living with his maternal grandmother, who was Victoria Mountbatten, Dowager Marchioness of Milford.
Marchioness
of Milford Haven, at Kensington Palace. So he got to know his future home really early. And his uncle George Mountbatten, who was the second Marquis of Milford Haven in Berkshire. So while he's off in the UK going to school, his 4 older sisters had grown up and were getting married. And it just so happened that all 4 of his sisters moved to Germany, and each of them married a German prince.
Okay.
So
I guess the animosity with Germany didn't really make a big deal or make a big difference there.
well, not as far as the sisters' marriages, no.
No.
As far as their choice and husband,
Yes.
it does come into play though.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
yeah, so all of his sisters get married, all move to Germany with their respective prince. His mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was institutionalized, and his dad took off to Monte Carlo, really never to be seen by little Philip again.
Lovely.
Yeah. So in 1933, he moved on to a school in Germany, actually, the Schloss Salem, because it happened to be owned by the family of one of his brother-in-laws. So he got a steep discount on the school fees. However, that particular school had been founded by a gentleman named Kurt Hahn, who happened to be Jewish. And in 1933, and going into 34, that was turning out to be a bad thing to be in Germany.
Oh boy.
So Herr Hahn fled to Scotland and founded a new school called the Gordonstown School, and Philip ended up going there with him to continue his studies. In 37, one of Philip's sisters, Cecile, and her husband and their children and her mother-in-law were all killed in a plane crash, which at that point Philip was 16. He did attend the funeral, But apparently that sister and her husband were members of the Nazi Party. So sad that Philip lost his sister. Not a loss for the Nazis.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I mean, looking back on it with 2021 eyes, we look at it and like, oh no, the Nazis, and yes, they were awful. I'm not gonna dispute that. At the time, where this is 1937 in Germany, and even there were even some leaders abroad who were like, okay, yeah, this Hitler guy, he's actually doing a lot of good for Germany, and it just, I mean, that's kind of why.
Little did they know.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you've heard that analogy of, you have one thread and you keep winding it and winding it, like you can break one thread, but then, slowly, or, the boiled frog principle. You start out cold and just by degrees gets hotter and hotter and hotter until, you're boiled to death. So, we hear, like, now we hear the term Nazi and we rightly recoil. At the time, it was like, they're actually doing a lot of good. It's like, oh my. So, yeah. So it's.
Or at the very least, people tried to remain neutral.
Yes.
Right.
Because they had business with Germany.
Yeah. This is a reminder, history is messy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. So Philip finished his schooling in Scotland, and in 1939 he joined the Royal Naval College in Dartmouth. He completed a term as a cadet, and then went back to Greece. Actually, apparently that whole banned from Greece thing didn't stick.
I was gonna say, I'm sure he probably visited Greece from time to time.
Actually, his mother was living there. She was in Athens, at least in mid 1939. So he actually went there and lived with her for like a month, and actually repatriated to Greece. But and he probably would have stayed there longer with his mom. But duty called, and King George, Greek King George II, who happened to be Philip's first cousin, told him that he needed to return to Britain to resume his training for the Royal Navy. So back to cadet life and military life Philip went. But that actually ended up being a good thing, as much as he probably wanted to stay in Greece and hang out with his mom. It ended up being serendipitous that the Greek king was like, no, you need to go back and finish your military training, because it just so happened that not long after he had returned to Britain and to Dartmouth, that the King of England, King George the Sixth, and Queen Elizabeth came for a tour of the Royal Naval College, and they just so happened to have with them their two daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. During the visit, the Queen and Philip's uncle Mountbatten, asked his nephew to escort the princesses for part of their tour. What's funny is actually Elizabeth and Philip had met briefly like 4 years before, when Elizabeth was about 9 at a wedding. But that wasn't really a significant meeting, unlike this time, where she and Philip really connected, and Elizabeth essentially fell head over heels for this guy. So they began exchanging letters after that visit. So it's like, love letters.
I mean, given how long their marriage lasted, ended because he died. It's like 73 years. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
That's just years married.
Yes.
Yes.
They had known each other, for almost a decade before they even got married.
So let's round it up and say probably 83.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thereabouts. So
shoot, that's. I mean, when I read, was reading the obituaries and the tributes and things like that. And then I saw the dates and everything. I was like, that is amazing for anybody. But so I'm gonna it's probably not too far fetched to say that's a pretty epic love story there.
Yeah. So Philip finished his training for the Royal Navy, graduated from Dartmouth in 1940. World War II is still occurring at this point. So he ends up joining the British forces and serving. It just happened that two of his brothers-in-law that were still, obviously one had passed, but he had two of the three remaining brothers-in-law fought on the other side for Germany. So
that could put a damper on family reunions.
Yeah, imagine Christmas was
bit.
kind of awkward.
Just a little. Yeah.
Just a smidge. So he was appointed as a midshipman in January of 1940. By February of 1941, he had moved up to sub-lieutenant. Then he was promoted to lieutenant the following July in 1942. And then in October of 42, he became the first lieutenant of the HMS Wallace at the age of 21. He bounced around from like ship to ship to ship to ship for during his times, especially during World War II. So you can read up on if you're someone who's like really into ships and names and histories of ships, you can go look that up. But I'm not gonna be like, and this ship and then this ship and then this ship. And then in 1944, he moved from the HMS Wallace to the HMS Whelp, and he was actually in Tokyo when the instrument of surrender was signed by the Japanese.
Wow.
Yep. And then after that, the Whelp was returned to the UK in early 1946, in January 46. In the meantime, while he's serving on all of these ships and stuff, he and Princess Elizabeth, are still exchanging letters. She actually served in World War II herself as a working on engines, like car engines. So she was a mechanic essentially. So she knows her way around an engine. So no AAA for her. She doesn't need it.
Nope.
It makes me wonder if like in her off days she like has a garage where she works on.
Yeah.
I'm angry. I need to take my aggressions on a piece of machinery that doesn't work. Let me fix it.
Parliament's being dumb again.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm gonna go take an engine apart and put it back together. It makes me feel better.
No, it reminds me of this series that I've been listening to the audiobook, and it's anyway, it's this family and the grandmother. They live in a warehouse because they had to sell their house to pay for their dad's cancer treatments, and he passed. But their grandmother, she works on tanks. She has her own
Nice.
garage and everything, and I'm like, oh my goodness, to
Yeah.
have the queen working on cars.
There are some pictures out there. If you're looking for it.
Mhm.
There's pictures of her like in
That's an image.
like the jumpsuit. Like you see like
Mhm.
mechanics wear with you
Yep.
know her hair tied up and standing next to a truck with like the hood open, just ready to go at it with a wrench. So it's pretty badass actually. So get yourself a woman who knows her way around a wrench.
Mhm.
If that's what Philip was looking for, by Jove, he got it. Speaking of which, so by the summer of 46, the war is over-ish, winding down. And Philip goes to King George and asks for the king's permission to marry his daughter. And the king was like, absolutely. Can you wait to make it official till she turns 21? Which wouldn't be till the following year in 47. They're like, okay, no problem. We can wait. So she turned 21 in April of 47, and their engagement was officially announced by the palace on the 10th of July, 1947. And at that point, Philip had renounced his Greek titles, became a British citizen, and took the last name Mountbatten. He obviously proposed to her. She got an engagement ring. Her engagement ring, the center stone, whopping 3-carat diamond, surrounded by a number of smaller diamonds, were all taken from a tiara that had belonged to his mother. And then the leftover diamonds were turned into a bracelet that she wears like all of the time. So. So the wedding, the engagement was announced in July. The wedding was planned for November. Not a lot of turnaround time at Westminster Abbey. The day before the wedding was to take place, the king bestowed on Philip the title of His Royal Highness. And then the morning of, he was given the titles of Duke of Edinburgh, Earl of Marionette Hand, and Baron Greenwich. They got married at Westminster Abbey. This was any bride that talks about how they want the perfect wedding day. Even royalty cannot have, with all the power and money that they have, could not guarantee a perfect wedding day. Because this was rationing was still a thing post World War II. To get the material needed to make her wedding dress, Elizabeth had to use ration coupons to buy the material for her gown. It ended up being it's a beautiful dress. You wouldn't know rationing was happening at the time. But a number of things happened the day of the wedding. As she was at Buckingham Palace getting ready, she did her own makeup and hair and stuff. Her tiara snapped.
Oh no!
Oh,
Ouch.
Yes. Which not sure exactly how that happened, considering what
Unless
these
she's
things
got
are.
real thick curly hair, like a few of us in this
It
group.
may be.
Whew.
Maybe. Thankfully, the court jeweler was on call just in case something like this happened.
Ugh.
But he needed to go to his workshop to do the repair, so they gave him a police escort so that he could go to his workshop, make the repairs, and return in time to get the tiara on the bride.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
It also happened that she had been gifted some pearl necklaces and some pearl and diamond earrings to wear. She forgot those.
Oh.
And so her private secretary had to rush back to St. James Palace and get them back to Buckingham Palace in time for her official bridal portraits to be taken.
Oh,
Did
man.
secretary also get a police escort?
They didn't say so I'm guessing no. I don't know what the distance is from Buckingham Palace to St. James Palace.
Neither do I.
It probably wasn't nearly as far as the royal jeweler had to travel. Probably.
So anyone out there who has gotten married or will get married and is planning and freaking out about everything has to go off without a hitch, just take heart in the fact that Queen Elizabeth's wedding had a few hiccups of its own.
Yes.
So
Yes.
don't stress.
Yep. Like if the future Queen of England can't have a picture perfect wedding day without any hiccups, then you can live.
Yes. And it will be a funny story to tell later anyway.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously the ceremony ended up happening. They got married. It was aired over BBC radio. About 200 million people around the world listened in. So they got married, and after their honeymoon, they moved into Clarence House, which is in London. And they got Philip actually went back to back to the Navy and did some work for them, and Princess Elizabeth started taking on some of the official duties of doing like events and stuff on behalf of her father. And also in the process, they had two kids. Charles was born in 1948, and then Princess Anne followed in 1950. Philip continued his naval career until July of 1951. But even though he technically finished his career in 51, he still received a promotion and received the rank of commander in 1952. Probably because he was the husband of the Princess of
Yes,
would be my guess.
Yeah. Like when you're
Like
married,
commander sounds much better.
yes, when you're married into the royal family, you get stuff like that.
Yes. So at this point, the early 1950s, the king's health is starting to deteriorate. So both Philip and Elizabeth, or the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, start undertaking more and more royal duties. They did a tour of Canada in 51. In late 1951, and then in early 1952, they began a tour of other Commonwealth countries, and they were and this was depicted in The Crown fairly accurately, at least as far as official memoirs and memories go. They were in Kenya when word came the king had passed away on the 6th of February 1952, which essentially technically immediately made Elizabeth queen. so they had to leave Africa and immediately return to the UK to prepare for her coronation. So she was officially crowned queen on the 2nd of June, 1953. And this started the first kind of tussle between this monarchy and the establishment that had just kind of gone along with tradition up until this point, I think is the best way to put it. Because when a monarch comes into, being, taking the throne, their royal house has to be given a name, and that's kind of like the lineage, the legacy.
Yeah,
that
it's like
sticks.
like most people, they have a surname, a last name, a family name. Royals, they have their house. That's
Yes.
bit of a last name. That's what.
And that's how they tend to be referred to. Like, if we talk about like the Tudors,
yes,
things like that.
Yeah, so
talk about
so
that.
you'll hear, Henry Tudor. That's his name. Tudor is basically his last name.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Philip's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, suggested House of Mountbatten. Philip suggested House of Edinburgh, because that would be a good compromise, because that's both of their kind of titles as Duke and Duchess. But Queen Mary, Elizabeth's grandmother, and the Prime Minister at the time, Winston Churchill, both went to Elizabeth and was like, no, that name, the house name is House of Windsor. It should stay House of Windsor. And she sided with her grandmother and the Prime Minister, which Philip, obviously he didn't much have he didn't have a dog in this fight. What she said goes.
Right.
That didn't mean he couldn't complain, and apparently he privately said, "I am nothing but a bloody amoeba. I'm the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children."
Yeah, that was. I mean, if the crown, if it is as accurate as they say, I mean, there is definitely something about the balance between being a family, being and then being royalty, and being the royal family, and all the tradition and the pomp and circumstance, and the leadership that goes into that, the responsibilities, and it's kind of a tough balance to strike in a lot of ways. And so I'm reminded of all things of a line from the movie The Princess Diaries. And Julie Andrews as the queen says to Anne Hathaway's character, you think of everyone thinks a princess is supposed to be pretty, wear beautiful gowns, and marry the prince, live happily ever after, but it's more than that. It is a real job. And so it's like, how are you gonna approach that, or how is it gonna go? And so every time the royal family comes up, I always think of that line for some reason, just because it's they have what they they have all these things that they do as for the country, and some do it better than others, but your life is under a microscope, and nothing other than who you were born to, pretty much. So I don't know, I'm not being all like, oh, woe is them, but at the same time it's kind of like, that's got to be rough in some way. Yeah. I mean, everyone has their stuff that they go through.
Yeah. Well, and they were able to kind of make a compromise Later, after Elizabeth's grandmother had passed and Winston Churchill was no longer prime minister, Elizabeth was able to kind of do things more her way, and actually issued a order in 1960 that stating that Mountbatten Windsor would be the surname that any of her and Philip's male line descendants who did not receive the honorific as Royal Highness or Prince or Princess, although the princess part didn't apply then, but now, now that the line of succession, it does not matter the gender, it would be prince or princess. So, and it just so happened that when she did that about a week and a half before she gave birth to Prince Andrew in 1960. So I don't know if she knew she was having a boy at that time, but she's like, well, I'm having another one, so let's change things up a little.
Let's make it a little easier on everybody. Come on.
Yeah. And then they had one more child, Prince Edward, in 1964. So they ended up having 2 more children after she became queen. Although I didn't realize that there was such a huge age difference between Anne and Andrew. So I just always equated that. I always assumed that they were like really close to each other. I was like, no, she had Anne in 50 and Andrew in 60. There's a 10-year age gap between the two of them. So so that probably helped at least a little to be able to be like, okay, any more children that we have that aren't going to be, their Royal Highness will get the name Mountbatten Windsor, although that ended up not being the case with both Andrew and Edward, because they're both prince. So
yeah, I was gonna say the only one that I'm aware of that's the surname is Harry and Meghan's
son,
boy.
Archie.
Archie.
Yeah.
Like even all their grandkids are prince or princess of So I don't know. Again, family dynamics.
Yeah. And will probably be the case for the next Sussex, baby Sussex too. So more than likely. But even before that, even with the royal, house name, right after Elizabeth became queen, she made sure to acknowledge that Philip was going to be an integral part of her reign, and actually announced that that the Duke was to have place, preeminence, and precedence next to her on all occasions and in all meetings except where otherwise provided by Act of Parliament. So essentially, he would go with her to anything and everything and have just as much not just as much power, but he'd be like she's Captain Picard and he's Riker. So he would technically outrank even Charles, except in Parliament, although Philip would escort Elizabeth, or Her Royal Highness, to Parliament for the annual state opening ceremonies, but he was just there as her escort. He did not have any political power in Parliament like she does. There's that, and he also took on other royal duties on his own, not just as as Elizabeth's number one. In 1956, he actually, with Kurt Hahn, so he kept in touch with his former school teacher, I guess. They founded the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, that is given to youth to give them a sense of responsibility to themselves and their communities. So kind of a civil service award, but for youth. And he's actually, I think I read somewhere, I don't know if I can't find it now, but apparently that award has been given out to like millions of
Wow.
youth in the time that it's
Huh.
at various, apparently I guess there's like levels or something to it, but yeah, it's but it's given out to youth for who are exceptional in volunteering and doing things in their communities and stuff. And it's actually expanded beyond the UK to the Commonwealth too, so Australia, Canada, places like that, India. So between all of those, it's been given out to a large number of youth. And then from 1956 1957, he did kind of a world tour aboard the HMY Britannia, and it included him going to Melbourne, Australia, to open the Summer Olympics in '56, and visiting the Antarctic, which gave him the honor of being the first royal to cross the Antarctic Circle. He was quite the adventurer.
Yes.
He was.
I mean, there was that episode on The Crown where they make a big deal about him flying a helicopter or flying, like learning to fly, and it was just kind of like, okay, I had no idea he was, into that kind of stuff, but it's not like I.
Oh yeah, that's why he enjoyed being in the Navy, in the doing his military service so much. I think he even said in an interview, if he hadn't had to not necessarily give up his military career, but step aside to focus on his royal duties, that he probably would have made a life out of it and probably died in the line of duty, defending his country, probably. So but it made him a very, very worldly person. It made him very aware of other other cultures and other people of other countries, and food, which I'll expand upon that here in a little bit. So he, things like his award and stuff, were things that he started fairly early on after Elizabeth became queen. But his biggest thing, and the one that I want to make sure we touch on, is, and this is something that I think probably a good number of people don't realize, that this is kind of the bread and butter of the royals, is their charity work. The queen does have some political power. Any laws passed by Parliament have to go by her, and she has to give her okay. I don't know what happens if she said no. So she does have some political power. But I think when people think of the royalties, they think of them like doing ribbon cuttings at like train stations or something, and they do some of that, but they do a lot of work, not necessarily public, for lots of different organizations. Go ahead, Chrissy.
Well, I was just going to say, like, following the royal family Facebook page, it'll talk about the different royals, and they're a patron of this charity or that charity or that kind of thing, and so it's like, I get the feeling that, I mean, I read a lot of historical fiction and historical romance, which I know is not entirely accurate. But the whole idea of, you have the idea is you have this title, you have this sort of power, so to speak, or this you're very visible, so there is a big push to do good works, to do charity, and to bring awareness and to things. And this has been going on for a couple centuries or more. And so seeing what they do, and we've seen articles of, with William and Kate going to talk about mental health, and meeting with people, and like in the last year, I just saw a bit about, I think it was the Princess Anne, going and talking to medical personnel, with the virus and stuff like that. So it's, I mean, yeah, in America we're kind of thinking, well, we're not part of this, why should we care? And some of that, there's some merit to that, but also it's like they're for the most part they're trying to do something good, and to use their influence for good. And and I you can't fault them for any of that. Obviously, it's like, we could kind of use a little bit more of that, whether it's royalty or whoever doing this. So let them do it, quite honestly.
Yeah. According to the official website for the royal family, over the course of his life, the Philip was associated either as president, patron, honorary member, or some other capacity with almost 1,000 organizations.
Wow.
Oof, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And each of the royals has kind of their focus, like Chrissy was saying, now that the younger royals, especially William and Catherine, they've received patronages as, as we get here to Philip's final years, but also Her Majesty the Queen have started to lessen the amount of work that they do. So they passed on some of those patronages to the younger royals. But they also have subjects that are important to them, like mental health. And in the Duke's case, he was really he really liked to focus on the environment, industry, sports, and education. He also has a lot of military patronages too, which both William and Catherine have taken over most of those in the last probably 5 years or so, because the monarchy is the head of the military as well, kind of like the president here is technically the head of the United States military.
Yeah.
So you can actually go on the royal website and look at all of the patronages that every member of the royal family has been associated with, from Her Majesty all the way down. And you can search by like subject, or you can just look at by a particular member of the royal family. And I filtered it to just the Duke of Edinburgh's, and it's a long list. Everything from the UK Lawn and Tennis Association, which is essentially the organization that does Wimbledon, which I think Kate is now actually the patron of, and to whatever, take your pick. He's been involved with just a sheer number. He was president of BAFTA for 6 years between 1959 and 1965, and actually they just had the BAFTAs, and they made sure to acknowledge him. One is a British institution, it's the British essentially equivalent of the Oscars, but he was a former president of the organization. So they made sure to acknowledge him at the most recent ceremony. He was a patron of the British Heart Foundation for over 50 years, which, considering the number of times that he had been hospitalized for cardiac issues, I imagine that was something that, no pun intended, was close to his heart. So sorry about that. But one that I did not realize until I saw it was shared on Instagram. But he helped start and was president of the World Wildlife Fund.
Oh,
Really?
wow.
Yeah. I had no idea.
Me either.
Yeah.
Hmm.
He had helped he had helped found it, and was president in the UK of the UK, I guess, branch or whatever of the organization for a number of years, and then he became the international president for a good number of years, and then he was kind of just president ad nauseum for the rest of his life. So yeah, I had no idea. It just so happens that little side tangent, the fandom running, because I joined the group on Facebook, and was reading up on their stuff, and was directed towards an app called Charity Miles. And you can, if you use something like a Fitbit or whatever, or certain apps like the Nike Running Club app to track like your exercise and your steps and stuff. Your steps go into that app, and from there they will donate on your behalf to a chosen charity within their app. And I just so happened that when I first downloaded that app, that I use my chosen charity on there is the World Wildlife Fund. So I had been inadvertently supporting the Duke of Edinburgh as one of his OG charities for the last several months by logging those steps. So yay. But yeah, just the sheer number of organizations that he was involved in there's not a time for us to
Oh no,
cover them all. And that's it's seeing things like that, and now especially with social media, obviously things have had to be less active because of the pandemic and stuff, but even with the pandemic, that the Royals have really tried to still be as active with their charities and patronages as much as they can, whether it's doing Zoom calls with local food food pantries that are helping give out food to people that are have lost their jobs because of the pandemic, or even the Queen. There's been a picture, images of the Queen using Zoom to talk to people from different organizations and stuff. So it's like, it's very cool that even with this going on, and because of the pandemic, they have done things. Catherine has helped put together a book of because she's really big into art and photography, is what she studied in college. And she's a really good photographer too, if you've ever seen any of the stuff she shot. She's got a good eye. She put together a campaign and had people from around the UK submit images that kind of encapsulate, find an image that kind of encapsulates your experience with the pandemic. And they took like the top 100 of them. had a committee pick 100 of them, and they've put together this book now that people can purchase, kind of a coffee table type book. And I think some of the proceeds of that book are going to some of the charities and stuff to help support people that have been hurt because of the pandemic. It's things like that are like, yes, this is why the royals are important. For however you feel about the drama and politics and whatever, it's like there are so many organizations that would probably struggle to stay funded if you didn't get a name like the freaking Queen of England to be like, oh, look at this charity, and all of a sudden people are like, here, take my money, here, let me buy your product, or whatever it is that they do.
Yes.
You can't get better PR than freaking Queen of England.
If you're like, complain about it all you want. They have a place in our world, in our society and culture to an extent. So.
Over the course of his life, the Duke of Edinburgh was a very busy man. Between his charity and patronage work and his duties as both husband, father of the future King of England, and consort essentially to the Queen, essentially the person who is the Queen's biggest supporter, the person she can turn to no matter what. So and in February of 2013, he became the oldest ever male British royal and the third longest, and then in April 2019, he became the third longest lived member of the British royal family, which even before that, even all the way back in 2000, when he was a spry 79 years old, he gave an interview. He actually remarked then that he could not, quote, imagine anything worse, and had no desire whatsoever to become a centenary, saying, quote, bits of me are falling off already.
Well, he got his wish.
It only took 20 more years.
Yeah.
So even then, at 79, he's like, I'm old. I'm done. But he still kept going, though, because it wasn't until June of 2011, in celebration of his 90th birthday, that he said then that he was going to slow down, reduce his duties, start handing off patronages to the younger folks and stuff, because according to him, he had done his bit. Although he did get a new title from his wife, in honor of his 90th birthday. She gave him the title Lord High Admiral.
Well,
Nice.
that's quite the birthday present.
Right.
Yep. So he officially retired from royal duties on the 2nd of August 2017, with his final solo public engagement at the age of 96, where he had a meeting with some Royal Marines. He since then continued to do like familial type events, like Meghan and Harry's wedding, the Eugene and
Jack.
Yeah, Eugene and Jack's wedding, and other things like that. Family get-togethers for like the holidays and things like that. Sitting down for portraits for like he and the Queen's 70th wedding anniversary and things like that. He would still come out and do things for. But other than that, he was pretty much done doing official engagements. Again, according to, I believe, the royal website, I don't know who bothered to, well, I mean, it's the royals, I keep track of everything. Someone was keeping track, and they figured that since 1952, when he would officially, when Elizabeth would have become queen, even before her coronation, when her father passed, and he became consort to the Queen, that he had completed just solo engagements. This doesn't count anything he may have done, with his wife or his kids or his grandkids or something like that. Just solo engagement. He completed 22,219 solo engagements.
Ooh, wow.
Since 1952.
And there's definitely more, because he did a bunch with other people.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm sure if you count, engagements done with other people, you're probably getting into six figures, probably. Easily would be
Mhm.
my guess. So yeah, he kept pretty busy, even
Yeah.
as seemingly every so often, he would have something happen with his health. He's been hospitalized off and on for this, that, and the other thing, heart issues, bladder infections. Some things you could kind of expect when you get to a certain age. He had it was planned, but he had a total hip replacement 6 weeks before Meghan and Harry got married.
Wow.
So when you see him walking on his own at Harry and Meghan's wedding, that is 6 weeks post-op, full hip replacement. The man was a badass. Like, honestly. I was struggling, 3 months after having my gallbladder taken out, and that was not, having an entire joint replaced.
As I understand it, it's like, I mean, the family life was really important. Is really
Yes.
important to the royal family. So, getting to a grandchild's wedding, oh yeah, that, I mean, it's one of those things that I could see both Prince Philip and the Queen being like, no, you're going. He's like, no, I'm going. We're gonna do this, and I don't care if you have to wheel me in. I'm going to be at that wedding.
Yeah.
But to have him, walking on his own after having his hip replaced so soon, whew, hats off to you, man.
Well, for people that have lived long lives, you see interviews with people that have lived into their 90s and sometimes triple digits, and they ask them, what's your secret to long life? And a lot of them will say keeping busy. Not acting your age helps quite a bit. Keeping yourself mentally young helps keep you feel physically young. And he did do that. I mean, he played polo for the longest time. Like Chrissy mentioned, he was an avid pilot. He started flying lessons in 1952, and by the time he turned 70, he had accrued over 5,000 pilot hours. And funnily enough, there in 2014, there was a report that an old newsreel film had been discovered of when Philip was doing a flying tour of South America in the 1960s. And apparently in this film, he's piloting, the aircraft, and his co-pilot was Captain Peter Middleton, Catherine's grandfather.
Oh, wow. Talk about a small world.
Yeah. Yeah. He was an avid painter. He apparently was a huge foodie. I promise I get back around to this. Like I'll put this in the show notes. This video is from like a year ago, but it's an interview with a former royal chef, and while he's speaking, he's demonstrating how to make actually one of Prince Philip's favorite meals. And I think again this comes from his time in the military, traveling around the world to all these places, serving on all these different ships. He just became very adventurous when it came to food, and apparently loved barbecue and grilling. If he could, he would grill out every day of the week, apparently, and not just like your stereotypical like steak and hamburgers and hot dogs. Like, he would grill anything and everything he could get his hands on, and just really loved using different like exotic spices and rubs and oils and different flavors and stuff. I was joking with Chauncey. I said there were, apparently, the Prince Philip and the Queen's food relationship is kind of similar to Chauncey and I, where the wife's palate dictates what the family eats. And so, if the Queen doesn't like something, nobody gets that in their meal. Apparently, she doesn't like garlic. Vampire confirmed. I don't know.
No, weren't they all supposed to be werewolves?
Werewolves?
Yeah,
According to Doctor Who.
Yeah. I love garlic, so
Yeah, same here.
I had garlic earlier, actually. Although I could see, not eating garlic, if you're going to be meeting like a head of state or something.
Right.
But
yeah.
apparently she
Yes.
just doesn't like garlic. But apparently
enough.
if she would go away for something and Philip did not go with her, it was very exciting for him, because then he could have whatever he wanted for dinner.
He could have the stuff that was on the verboten list.
Yes.
He's like, okay, Grandma's not here. We're gonna grill.
Mhm.
And
Break
extra
out the
garlic.
hot sauce and all the spicy things, because
Oh my
Granny
God.
ain't home.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. I love it, especially because I love barbecue.
Yeah, so I thought that was so funny, because Chauncey does the same thing. He'll buy things that he knows I won't eat, but he'll wait and make that for like lunch or dinner for himself when he knows I'm not home. He's like,
Nice.
He's like, then I'll have to make 2 separate meals. Like, Rachel's not home. Time for fish. Even if it does make the apartment smell like fish. But yeah, I thought that was so funny. So
See, the royals, they're people like us.
yeah,
Mhm.
they are. So that being said, obviously we are now to present day, and the Duke is no longer with us. But this is aside from the stuff that they're going to have to adjust because of the pandemic, this has been planned since like the 60s or something like that. Not long after Elizabeth became queen, essentially, plans were made for both what would happen when Philip passed and when she would pass, and possibly in our lifetime, whenever Charles passes.
Yeah, there's always contingencies, because they just have these things ready to go.
Yeah.
At the
Yeah,
drop of a hat.
and it's it's the kind of things like, what type of service would they want? Where do they want to be buried? that sort of thing. So, like I said, other than the COVID-19 adjustments, essentially what's going to happen later this week as we're recording this is what Philip has wanted and has been on paper for quite a long time. So officially, Operation Fourth Bridge is now in effect. For the Queen, it's Operation London Bridge. So the as planned, he passed on Friday. It was not released to the public until a press release was issued by the palace, and people like the Prime Minister and the head of like the House of Lords, the real high ups in the government had been notified. They had to be notified first. And then all the flags were lowered at half-mast, and they will remain there until 8 a.m. on the day following the Duke's funeral. So they are officially in the royal family essentially is in a period of officially 8 days of mourning. Although I do not believe that Saturday, when the funeral takes place, that is going to be a national holiday. Unlike when the Queen passes, I believe that will be a national holiday. So like the entire country essentially will shut down for her funeral. But I do not believe they're going to do that for the Duke. All Union flags, national flags, and other flags on governmental buildings, like flags of the armed forces, are supposed to be suggested to be replaced by a Union flag and at half-mast. However, the Royal Standard, which is the flag above Windsor Castle, will be continue to be flown at full mast because that represents the presence of a living monarch. So when Her Royal Highness passes, that flag will also go to half-mast, presumably, I guess. During this period of mourning, all UK television presenters must wear black. Members of Parliament, men who wear ties must wear black ties, and everyone will wear black armbands on their left arm when they're in the House of Commons, and no laws will be passed during this period. Hopefully there won't be any need to pass any laws during the 8-day period. We are in a pandemic, so I guess if it is a matter of national emergency, they could make an exception. Again, I do not know how it works if the Queen can't or is doesn't want to check yes on a law. So I assume there's probably some plan in place for that. I would hazard to guess. The fact that we are in a pandemic is kind of unprecedented.
Yeah, we're making this up as we go along.
A little bit. But yeah, no laws are supposed to be passed during the mourning period. The BBC suspended all non-children's programming on Friday, so that they could show other things, special reports, all sorts of things. And that evening, the tenor bell at Westminster Abbey rang and was tolled once a minute, every minute for 99 minutes to reflect the Duke's lifespan.
Wow.
Yep. So as far as the funeral, and this you can read this. There's a page for it on the royal website. Plus, it's been also posted by all the major news sources as well. How the funeral is going to take place. The Duke never wanted a state funeral. He wanted more of a military style funeral, because his military service, that's what he wanted, so that's what they're going to give him. So he indicated that he wanted minimal fuss. So even without the
sounds like him.
pandemic, this is not going to be a whole lot of pomp and circumstance. So
Yeah.
he is not lying in state. He is lying at rest at the private chapel at Windsor Castle right now. And his coffin is draped with his personal standard, and flowers, his naval cap, sword, and it will stay that way until the service. So the ceremony is going to be on the same level as far as pomp and circumstance to the Queen Mother's funeral and what they gave Diana after she passed. And it is expected to be televised. So check your local.
Yeah, I know. I was watching the
probably
national...
BBC on YouTube probably will be the easiest, more likely, or the BBC website.
And I know one of the major networks here is going to be airing it at 9:30 Eastern time.
Yeah,
to watch. So
yeah,
check local listings.
Yeah, because the ceremony is supposed to take place at 3 p.m. UK time.
Right.
So it's planned for the Saturday, the 17th of April. It is going to be the pallbearers are going to be some guards, and his coffin will be carried by those grenadier guards from where the Duke the coffin is lying at Windsor Castle, to being transported to St. George's Chapel in a Land Rover that Philip helped design.
Of course.
Yes. They are expecting representatives from the various military organizations, the Navy, the Marines, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, Royal Air Force, to be lined up on the route, and some of the family members are expected to walk. I think we all remember the image of young William and Harry walking behind their mother's coffin. Because of COVID, the number of guests attending the actual funeral is limited to 30, although that does not include people working, like the pallbearers and the clergy who will be conducting the ceremony and stuff. But it is expected that it's going to be just the closest members of the royal family, the Queen's and Philip's children, and then their children. I don't know about any great grandchildren. I guess it would just depend on, because once you start including the great grandchildren, you can get up to 30 really quickly.
Yeah.
Because they have her Royal Highness and the Prince have 4 kids.
Right.
Each of those kids have at least 2 children, and then at least 2 of those kids have kids.
Children,
So
yeah,
they have like 10 great grandchildren at this point or something like that. So
Let's see. Yeah, 10.
yeah,
I've got a list up here and I'm
yeah,
looking.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
they could get up to 30 pretty darn quick.
yeah.
Mhm.
So if you don't see any of the little ones, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
One, because
Well,
it's
and it's
not
when
necessarily
you're
appropriate for kids. You never know how they're
No.
going to act in, in a situation that's supposed to be quiet and solemn.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
and I mean, I just had my grandparents' funerals just in the last 6 months
Mhm.
here, and my kids. I mean, we brought coloring books for Alex, and Lottie was just a baby, so it's
Yeah.
like you.
You-
They're
you kn-
little kids. They're not. They don't really know what's going on, but
Yeah, yeah.
although the again the statement that I saw from William, he was talking about how he was grateful that like his older kids got to know their great grandfather, and just
Mhm.
what a treat that was, and that
Mhm.
he's grateful that happened. And now if you we'll link to, we'll see if we can link to William's statement. It was really good.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, you are such. I can't wait till you're king. Honestly, you're gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
He's gonna be great when it comes to that time.
Yeah.
I mean, that may sound insensitive given what's going on, but every time William says something or does something, I'm just like, you're awesome, dude.
Yeah.
You're the greatest. And Kate, I love her.
Yeah. So there's going to be a national minute of silence at 3:00 at the top of the hour before the ceremony service actually begins. The Dean of Windsor and the Archbishop of Canterbury are going to perform the service, and they're expecting the Duke to be buried at the Royal Vault at St. George's Chapel, where Her Majesty is eventually is expected to be buried there too once she passes. So
I
the
still hope that's a long way off.
yeah. Well,
Mhm.
yeah.
I know.
I mean, people,
know.
people have speculated, when this moment would come, what would she do? And as far as everyone is concerned, and this has come from the people that know her best, people like William and
Mhm.
her children and her, the people and the like, that she plans on ruling up until she passes, regardless.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
Nope.
yes, she has pulled back on some work and has passed along some of those patronages to Charles and Camilla and the like, and but she is still planning on working, obviously health and pandemic permitting.
Right.
So whether we'll see, how soon we'll actually see her return to public, again, pandemic aside, after the 8 days of mourning has passed, I'm sure they're going to leave that up to her. I don't think she's going to be like,
Right.
okay, 8 days are over, back to work. If she needs more time, I don't think anybody's going to begrudge her if she wants more time.
No.
Before getting back to work. It's unfortunate that the family, this is their first chance to get together, likely in a while, because of the pandemic under these circumstances. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's not even going to be everybody. Harry has arrived in the UK. He is currently self-quarantining so that he can get through the quarantine period in time for Saturday. Unfortunately, Meghan is extremely pregnant with baby number 2, and she was advised it's not medically advisable for her to do the 12-hour flight to the UK, even without the pandemic. As pregnant as she is, she doesn't need to be getting on a plane. and the like and all that. So she is staying behind with Archie, presumably. So, but hopefully that they can take this solemn event and find some light in
Yeah.
what is an extremely sad time,
Yeah.
not just for the family, but the entire country, but definitely the
Yeah.
family. I mean, it's always
Yeah.
hard when you lose a family member, but when you
Mhm.
have someone who was such a pillar to an entire country, a
Mhm.
number of countries, a commonwealth of millions and millions and millions of citizens. It's a loss. It
Yeah,
really is a
it
loss.
is. At the same time, I mean, 99 years old. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so many of us are like, if I live to be 100 and, do even a fraction of what he did, it's like, it is sad. And it's like, I mean, I was sad when my grandparents passed away and they were in their 80s. And at the same time, you're kind of like, I'm glad that that I had them for as long as I did, and I'm glad that I got to know them and all these things. So it's bittersweet as well. And it, I mean, especially if they have health problems, which it kind of seemed like um, Prince Philip had his share of that as well. So it's sad, but it's also a celebration of his life and looking back on the things that he did and the legacy that he lives or that he left behind. And the the example he left for his family and also for the entire world. So yeah, it is sad. I am not going to diminish that at all. I also feel like it's a time to celebrate to an extent.
Yes, you can
Celebrate a life.
mourn the life lost, but celebrate the life lived.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Of a life very well and fully lived.
Very much so. And if they've been discouraging people from leaving things like flowers and balloons and stuff outside the various residencies, they although people have still been doing so, but if you are inclined to make some sort of token, in honor and respect, or in memory of whatever, whether one of his patronages is something that maybe personally affected you in your life or something, or just as a show of respect, look at those list of patronages and see if you can give a financial contribution, and help continue the Duke's work.
Yes. Yeah, and there's also an online condolence book that you can leave your wishes to the family. It's on the royal family website. Shouldn't be hard to find.
Yeah. As long as you can get to it. I tried to get to it the other day and it just sat and just ran and spun.
Yeah,
I imagine a lot of people are trying to get to this website right now. I will come back later.
Yeah, just keep checking back. I finally got through and left a little note and just
yeah,
because those, I mean, I'm sure there's like hundreds and hundreds of people, millions of people leaving notes. It just, I don't know. I always felt nice, when someone just said something about when my grandparents passed away. So I just was like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anyone who's lost a loved one, likes, or sure appreciates the acknowledgement, even from people that they don't know, that it's just one of those things as human beings that just connects us, is
yes,
love and loss.
Yeah. And that is something, for all our differences and for all the whatever going on, that's one thing we all understand.
Yep. So And like I said, of course, we will try to. I will, as many links as possible in the
Yeah.
show notes for this week's episode. So
Yeah, and definitely we missed talking about so much. So yeah, check out those other tributes. Check out there's video interviews, or videos of things that they've done in the past, speeches and whatnot. Just whatever you're inclined to check out, do so.
yeah, there's a lot out there. So please enjoy what we link to on our website.
Yep.
Enjoy the rabbit hole of history.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, absolutely
Very.
fascinating, the history.
Yes.
And like I said, he lived for a good chunk of the 20th century. So if 20th century history is your thing, there you go. And again, our website is thefivishfangirls.com. We will forego any of the usual stuff that we do that we plug at the end.
Shameless self-promotion.
just out of respect, but it'll return in due time.
Yep. So with that, we shall sign off for this week.
This is Brittany and Troy saying goodnight.
This is Chrissy saying goodnight from Salt Lake City.
This is Holly from Wisconsin saying good evening.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I will leave you all with part of Harry's statement that he made in remembrance of his grandfather. He has been a rock for Her Majesty, the Queen, with unparalleled devotion, by her side for 73 years of marriage, and while I could go on, I know that right now he would say to all of us, beer in hand, oh, do get on with it.
Oh.